Hey guys, welcome into Ask Rice. This is a live Q&A. We are joined by Mike Rice via the fancy Mondo pad and the InFocus video phone, which is where he's at. It's a pretty sweet connection, and we have the ability now to be live with Mike Rice, can ask him all of your questions. You've been submitting them on Facebook, on Twitter, all over the place. So you want to make sure that you keep submitting those questions, and we'll get to the ones in the chat as well. So let's start this first one off. Are you ready, Mike?
I'll tell you what, it's Friday morning, and I'm always ready on Friday morning.
Of course you are. Well, let's start with a hard hitter. Here we go. This one comes from Christian on Facebook. And he says, hey, Mike, once again, it seems our bench is up and down. Given the health of our starting five at playoff time, how far do you think our bench will help us go? And are the next couple of games winnable without Aldridge?
You know, this West, a lot has to do with teams' bench and when they play other teams. If you look at certain teams in the playoff run, Phoenix, for instance, they were no injuries like the Blazers. They had the same starting lineup for a long time, and then along came an injury to Bledsoe. Once that injury, they found out how to play without him after about 4 or 5 games. Dragic got hurt, sprained an ankle. Phoenix lost 3 in a row. He should be back for New Orleans tonight. But it just depends on if you're in the West. For instance, take the Blazers and the bench stepping up. Would the bench have been able to step up if the Blazers would have played the teams they're going to play in this next 5-game road trip? They play Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Memphis, New Orleans. 4 of those 5 teams are above 500. Where the Blazers had an advantage, they played Denver twice, Utah, Minnesota, and Brooklyn, all below 500 teams. Would the Blazers have had the same record with their bench without LaMarcus Aldridge if they would have been playing those next 5 teams the Blazers play on the road rather than those below 500 teams? So your bench can step up, which the Blazers bench did, and they went 4-1 without LaMarcus Aldridge, but they probably would have been 1-4 without LaMarcus if they would have had that tough road stretch. So it depends when you play people how your bench is going to do. As it was, the bench got more and more confidence as it went along, and the Blazers came out with it with just supreme confidence now, and they're ready for a very difficult March schedule. I don't know if they would have been ready for that if the schedule had been tougher at the end of February for them, but it worked out perfectly, and it hasn't for Phoenix, for instance. Since the All-Star break, they're 3-3. And if you look, Dallas is 4-1, Golden State is 4-1, the Blazers 4-1, Memphis 3-1. So Phoenix has dropped from 4th all the way down to 8th, and Memphis is only a half a game behind. So it's not so important. The Blazers' next 4 games, it looks like winners for them because of what the bench did and getting LaMarcus back probably tomorrow. Phoenix is the team that really has to worry. They have 4 games at home coming up, 2 of them against Clippers in Oklahoma City. And then they go on the road, 14 of their final 21 games for Phoenix on the road. So the team that's in the most trouble to make the playoffs would probably be Phoenix, with Memphis passing them up. But it looks like the other spots are pretty well firm, simply because the Pelicans, they lost Ryan Anderson. You know, there's a case that they were in the same situation with the Blazers. They lost Ryan Anderson, one of their best players, like the Blazers lost LaMarcus. But they played 5 Western above 500 teams right after that happened. They lost all 5 of them. They've lost 18 out of the last 26 games. And the Pelicans went right out of the playoff picture. So in the West, it just depends on when your guys get injured and who they are playing coming up. The Blazers have been very fortunate with their schedule losing LaMarcus when they did.
And that actually leads into a question that we have quite a few people asking, Rice. And this is one of, do we need LA to come back for the next set of games before the road trip? They are playing, I guess what you could say, are struggling teams. So is that a situation where you think LaMarcus should come back before the trip? Or do you think that he should continue to get some rest if the Trailblazers can win without him?
I don't think rest. I think from the All-Star break and from the heavy load that he had, averaging 38 minutes a game before the All-Star game, I think any injury that he had with the groin probably has healed completely. I think he's probably ready right now to play. I don't think he needs any more rest. I think these next 4 games are really important for the Blazers, because if you look at the 10 road games they have in March, 2 5-game road trips, the first one is against all above 500 teams except New Orleans, and the Blazers never play real well against New Orleans there. And then the second one is a tough Eastern trip with Chicago Bulls included. Memphis is in that trip, so it's a tough trip. And so I think as soon as you can get LaMarcus back 100% healthy, that helps the Blazers, because right now the Blazers are in 3rd place. And if you look at who they might play, they're going to either play the Rockets, the Clips, Dallas, or Golden State. It looks like one of those 4 teams, and it could be any one of those 4 teams, how close the West is. The Blazers want to have home court advantage against those 4 teams. It'll be a tough first round. In fact, Sarah, I'll mention the first round. If it were today, and it very well could be at the end of the next 25 games, Oklahoma City would play Phoenix or Memphis. Right now, they're the 8th place team. San Antonio would play Golden State. The Blazers would play Dallas, and the Clips would play the Rockets. Think of those 4 opening round games. I mean, those are all national televised games. I don't know if they'll televise one Eastern playoff game because it'll be terrible first round. But OKC and Memphis, San Antonio and Golden State, Blazers, Dallas, Clips, Rockets. I mean, those are games that could be semifinal or final of the West. So you want to get LaMarcus back as soon as you can to get your seedings properly set.
And that actually leads into some questions that we have all over the place. So many of you guys asking very, very similar questions. One of them to you, Rice, is who do you want to face in the first round of the playoffs? Does Portland have a team that they don't want to face, or that they do think they'd have better odds against?
I think Memphis would be difficult. They play good defense, and they pound the ball inside. Those are 2 things that the Blazers, having Conley come off pick and rolls, that would be a difficult matchup. So we'll probably not. Memphis could move up more than the 8th spot, because right now they're 3-1 since the All-Star break. Since they have Marc Gasol back, they're a really highly rated team. So I don't really love that matchup. I like the Dallas matchup. The guy that would give us the most trouble, of course, Dirk is playing great basketball right now. But I think we could solve Monte Ellis in a 7-game series a little bit. So I wouldn't mind playing Dallas. Golden State, that would be a difficult matchup because their guards score and they have inside scoring and they like to run. So the Blazers haven't been great at transition defense. So Golden State may be a tough matchup. Clippers, I like the Clipper matchup. I think the Blazers, they're a tough ball club. What's going to help them is if they get, and they're going to sign today, Danny Granger, that's going to really help the Clippers in the playoffs, in a 7-game playoff, because he's tough to match up against. And I think OKC signing Caron Butler today, that's going to help them simply because Stephalosha is a guy the Blazers can play off of in the playoffs to help out on Westbrook and their big guy, their big scorer. And Caron Butler gives them experience, so OKC is going to be tough in the playoffs too. I pick them to win the West still, even though they're not playing well. They've lost 3 home games in a row with Westbrook coming back. But to me, they are the favorites. I think we match up really well with San Antonio. That's the team I think we've done the best against them. And I think LaMarcus Aldridge really plays well against Duncan. I would like to play them first, Golden State second, Dallas third, if I had my choice.
Okay. Well, as we talk about playoffs, we've got a question here from Ruckus. And he says, hey, Rice, with the schedule getting tougher, what kind of record will the Blazers need during the stretch run to have home court advantage in the first round?
I think of the 10 games in March that are coming up, the 10 road games, and they're spaced pretty well. The only problem with that first series of playing all the Texas team, playing Memphis and New Orleans, no one of the opposition has a back-to-back. We won't be playing anybody in a back-to-back, and we play 2 of those games on back-to-back. So they're all above 500. They're all still a little nervous about Memphis at that 9th spot moving up. So it's going to be difficult, but I think we're going to have to, of the 10 games, if we go 4-6, that would be marvelous. I think that would keep us in the top 4 if we could go 4-6 on that trip. Even losing 6 games, because we built up, right now we're 40-18, and if we won 4, we would be 44-24. So I think that would keep us in the top 4. But that's going to be difficult to do in March, to win 4 of those 10 games.
Definitely. Do you think they'll be able to do it down the stretch in April, even if they do fall, be able to earn their way back up into home court?
I think April looks real good if you look at it. The Blazers only have 2 road games in April, and they have 5 home games, 2 away games. So, and they're against half of them, more than half are against below 500 teams. So April, if we're right close to 4th, I think April will put us over the top into 4th place. But getting LaMarcus back fresh, really, and the confidence that this bench has gained in these last 4 games, I think that's really going to help us in this 10 games in March road trips. You can throw in Victor Claver now for one of the big guys. He looks like he's gained a lot of confidence. Really helps us on defense. You have Will Barton, who's scoring much better. He's always confident. So, you can go to different people. CJ is playing much better now, confidence-wise, because of these last 4 or 5 games. So Blazers, more than any other team in the West, feels really good about themselves. Maybe Dallas. Dallas has won 8 out of the last 10. They're on a high. The Rockets, they're probably playing as well as anybody in the NBA. They're playing better than OKC right now. So those are teams that Blazers are going to face on this next road trip that are really playing great basketball, but so are the Blazers.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talk about confidence, and a guy that's been showing a lot of confidence is Damian Lillard, and Boise Blazer wants to know, what changes has Damian made to make him finishing at the rim so much better lately?
Lillard is one of those guys like Brandon Roy that can really look at what's going on with his own team and what the other team is trying to do to game plan the Blazers, how to stop the Blazers. He really, and that to me is an art that guys like LeBron James, Michael Jordan, they could all look at what they need to do in a certain game. Now, LaMarcus Aldridge goes up, and when, and you hear a lot of athletes saying, well, I have to step up my game, but they have no idea how to do it. Lillard has an idea of, all right, they're going to try to, because LaMarcus isn't there, they're going to take away the 3-point shot from the Blazers. So what I have to do is get more aggressive, penetrating with the dribble, getting to the foul line, getting more layups, and he has the skills to do it. So that's why you see now he would have had probably 30 points in this last ball game against Brooklyn if the Blazers would have needed it. But as it was, they didn't play the whole fourth quarter, the starters. And that was a great thing because they went to Denver the next night, and he had enough energy to really play an outstanding ball game against Denver, one that the Blazers didn't play well. But Lillard understands what is needed, and he has the skills to carry it out. So that's the difference in Lillard now than from last year. Last year, Lillard, he was just trying to be part of the picture. Now he is the picture along with L.A.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that game against Brooklyn, and we've got a question here from Nick, and he says, Mike, does the win against Brooklyn prove that you can win in the NBA with small ball?
I really think it does. It depends a lot. Small ball didn't work really well against Denver because Denver had Hickson, they had Fareed, they had a lot of guys, Mozgov, that could score inside, and you couldn't put a small ball guy like Darrell Wright on one of those guys, and it showed. But when you played Brooklyn, Brooklyn is one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the NBA. They don't excel at it. They don't try to do it. They all get back. So you could play small ball against them and get away with it. You couldn't play that against Memphis. You couldn't have Darrell Wright checking Marc Gasol or Zach Randolph because they immediately would go right at them and tried to score at them, and it would break down the Blazer defense. So once again, it shows Coach Stotts against certain opponents, small ball works. Like against Phoenix, small ball would work, and we'd probably use it. We didn't early in the year, and that's why Phoenix gave us so much trouble. Their big guys, Channing Frye, pulled the Blazer big guys away from the basket. They had inside scoring with Gortat way back then. Of course, he's gone now. But certain teams we didn't match up well with small ball. But there are other nights, like against Golden State, you can play maybe a guy on Lee and get away with it, whereas you can't against Memphis.
So we've got a question here from Jamie as well, and he says, who got stronger today? Was it Oklahoma City adding Caron Butler or the Clips adding Danny Granger when it comes to matchups with the Trailblazers?
I think both of them. I think Blazers, Caron Butler is an experienced guy like Derek Fisher. You wonder how a guy like Derek Fisher can hang around, but he knows when to take a shot. He knows when to be physical, when to back off. He just knows how to play people. Caron Butler's the same way. He knows he can score at certain times. He knows how to fit in with better players. That's his key with him going to Oklahoma City, Caron Butler, because they have stars on that team, and you need a guy that has played with stars. So I think Oklahoma City really has improved, adding Caron Butler, and I think Clips have improved because Jamal Crawford, you don't want to start him in the playoffs. You'd rather start a guy like Danny Granger and let Jamal Crawford come in off the bench and be a real explosive scorer, whereas Danny Granger can play some defense. He's a big two-guard. So I think both teams, the Blazers, I think they'd have more difficulty against Oklahoma City because they would sit Perkins down and play Caron Butler a little bit more. And I think they're much better playing small ball, Oklahoma City. So they would do better against the Blazers, I think, than the Clips would.
Okay. All right. Moving on to a question about rotations, and this also involves the bench play as of late. This question comes from Joe, and there's a couple iterations of this question, but this one says it out pretty specifically. He says, did T-Rob and Victor Claver pass Myers in the rotation now based on their play as of late? Do you think there's been any changes based on injury?
That is a great question. It really is. And I don't think Coach Stotts can answer that because these last 4 games have kind of opened his eyes up to, and I've been saying this right along, Victor Claver, his ability to help a team comes through his smartness. He really knows how to play help defense. He's like Shane Battier. Battier starts for Miami because he knows how to play with stars and he knows how to help on defense. And that's what Claver does. Claver knows how to play with a LaMarcus Aldridge and a Damian Lillard, probably better than T-Rob and Will Barton. Both T-Rob and Will Barton always have been of the opinion, let me loose and I'll be your star. I'll be the guy that can score the big basket. And you don't want that mentality when you're playing with Wesley Matthews and Nick. And you've got guys that really play well as a team. And when you throw Will Barton, now Will Barton's getting better at it. I never thought he'd come this quick as a team player, but he is. T-Rob still is going to be very inconsistent. He's going to have a big night. And then if he plays against certain bigger people that like Memphis, he would have a real tough time. He did great against Kevin Love. He really did. He probably won the game for the Blazers. But I think Claver fitting in certain nights would be better than some of the other bench guys. I think CJ against certain guys, he would, if the Blazers need a score, he would fit in well. So it is really, the rotation question is really going to be interesting with Coach Stotts on this next road trip, because that's when you're going to need a solid rotation, because you're playing against above 500 Western teams. That second unit will take advantage of the Blazers' second unit if they're not ready to play, like in Denver. The Blazers wanted to rest their starters. They got a big lead. And then the second unit didn't hold it because of rebounding, and the Blazers starters had to go back in, and they could have lost that Brooklyn game if they didn't have an outstanding game and Brooklyn didn't come to play. But in the playoffs, I mean, your second unit has to really help you. And so I think we're going to find out a lot about the Blazers' second unit in rotation on this next 5-game road trip. I think this road trip is really going to challenge the Blazers. They've won enough games to really not to panic with this 5-game road trip. It's a challenge, and I think it's going to be a good one.
Well, we're going to be doing some more of these Ask Rices, and some of them are going to come from the road since we have the fancy new video phone from InFocus. So you guys be staying tuned for that. We've got another good question here, and this one comes from Z-Man. He says, what's up with the defense? Yeah, it's been looking a little bit better, but how can we get better before playoffs is the question.
And that's when you're asked that question combined with the question, who should the Blazers play in the playoffs? Certain teams run the pick and roll and end up with a mid-range jump shot like the Clippers. They have Chris Paul. He is so smart in his pick and roll offense. The Blazers don't defend teams like that very well. They use a system where they stay out on three-point shooters. They don't help off the wings on pick and roll defense. The big guys are the ones that help. And so if you have a smart point guard like Dragic of the Phoenix Suns, he really takes advantage. Chris Paul takes advantage of the Blazer defense. So lately they've been doing more switching because they're playing small ball. And the switching by the Blazers on pick and roll plays really has worked well for them. So in the playoffs, and it's always, they try to keep the Blazer big guy involved in the defense because the big guys of the Blazers are dropping back. They're protecting the rim. And the smart point guards have that area around the foul line to operate in. So it just depends on how the Blazers adjust in a 7-game series. And I think it's a good coaching staff, and they're going to have to change that pick and roll defense against certain teams in the playoffs. So we're hoping the playoff defense improves more so than it has during the regular season.
And as you talk about playoffs and coaching, we have a question here. A lot of people want to know about the playoffs and what we're going to do in the playoffs. And as we get closer, of course, hopefully this will clear up a little bit more. But AJVD says, do you think that the Blazers will narrow it down to even an 8-man rotation in the playoffs? Or is it too soon to think about that, Rice?
I don't think it's too soon. That's why I said this next 5-game trip, you're going to have people that you can depend on. And in this 5-game trip, they're going to put certain people in positions to either help or fail, and then they're going to know we can't play those guys in the playoffs. There's certain guys that are going to step up in the playoffs against certain teams, and I think this 5 games are really going to help the mentality of Coach Stotts on who to use in the playoffs. So you have to be challenged. Luckily, when Aldridge went out, the Blazers had 2 Denver games, 1 Utah game, 1 Minnesota game, 1 Brooklyn game. Those were confidence builders. Now you're going to play 5 teams where confidence will play into it, but how do they actually play against good playoff teams? And that'll decide your rotation. If somebody like Claver steps up, gets a chance to play on this road trip and does well, they'll use him in the playoffs. But if T-Rob and his energy looks better, then they'll use him in that same spot. So the Blazers in the next 25 games, that playoff roster will be determined. So I think it's good that the Blazers are 40-18 because they can take a look at different people, and Myers Leonard will be one of those people. There may be certain teams that Myers Leonard can play well against. Unfortunately, he hasn't been part of this confidence builder by the second unit, and he needed that. He needed to show Coach Stotts, I can help this team in certain situations. Right now, T-Rob has showed him. Will Barton has shown that he can do it. Claver a little bit in this last game. So that's a step up for those 3. Myers Leonard hasn't had that chance to step up. So, he'll probably play tomorrow from what I hear. I'm not sure, but it's going to be tough to play him in that 5-game road trip, but I think the Blazers have to find out things in that trip.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you talk about confidence and finding things out and talking about the playoffs, because that's really what we're racing towards now, Allie wants to know, Mike, do you think we'll make it out of the first round? And I guess you can preface that and say, does that depend on the opponent?
Allie, believe me, and he tweets me all the time, so it's a good tweet, or she, one of the two. I think once again, what you said, Sarah, it depends on who the Blazers play. That's why it is so important to come out of March of the top 4. Because if you have home court advantage, I'll tell you, there's not a lot of teams that really want to come to the Moda Center right now. The Moda Center is alive. If you go, and you can go to Memphis, you can go to a lot of arenas right now, the Clips, and the fans aren't alive. They're not helping their team. Whereas at the Moda Center, it's the players really get the feel that, we're not doing this by ourselves. We've got the fans behind us, whether we miss 5 shots in a row. So no one wants to be the team that plays the Blazers if the Blazers have home court advantage at the Moda Center. So that's why it's important for the Blazers to be in the top 4. It wasn't earlier. I was just keeping my fingers crossed, like Phoenix, that make the playoffs. But now that we've got through this stretch without LaMarcus and he's fresh, I'm being greedy. I want the top 4. I want home court advantage. And then it gets down to, I'll give you an idea who the Rockets are 17-12 on the road. So they're not a great road team. Dallas is 17-14 on the road. So they're just around. The Clips are 16-15, only 1 game above 500 on the road. So all of those teams, they don't want to play the Blazers if the Blazers have home court advantage. Whereas the Blazers are 18-11 on the road, San Antonio 22-8, Oklahoma City 20-9. Although they've lost their last 3 games, once the playoffs get here, they'll be a better home team. So those are teams you don't want the Blazers to play in the first round if they don't have home court advantage. But all the rest of them, Memphis is not a bad road team, 15-10. So if you look at them and the way they punch the ball inside and they have Conley outside, I don't think the Blazers want to play Memphis in that first round.
And as you talk about kind of comparing the matchups of these other teams, we've got a good question here from Dave, and he wants to get specific. He says, how do the Blazers' two All-Stars compare to OKC Thunder's stars in terms of individual skill, offensive chemistry, and defensive prowess? So comparing the Trailblazers' success to OKC's, where does that match up for you, Mike?
I think OKC really has trouble with Aldridge. If Ibaka checks Aldridge, it takes him away from blocking shots, and it leaves lanes open. It leaves rebounding open for Lopez offensively. So OKC, although they have a lot of things that hurt the Blazers, Westbrook coming down on fast breaks against the Blazers' transition defense, that would be a problem in the playoffs. But I think the Blazers really match up well with them. I think they really match up well with San Antonio on the road. They've really had a great success winning in San Antonio the last 2.5 years. So they're not afraid to play them. So OKC and San Antonio, the teams with the best records, the teams with the best road records, the Blazers match up really well with. I think the Clips, with only one game over 500 on the road, I think the Blazers would do really well against them. The problem is the Blazers probably won't be playing those three teams in the playoffs. I think in the second round, if the Blazers make it through the first round against a Golden State or a Rockets, it's very well if the Blazers drop to fourth, they're in third right now, and they play the Rockets, that would be a tough matchup. The Rockets inside with Dwight Howard would really bother the Blazers. He's much stronger than Lopez physically. I think Harden, Jeremy Lin, they just have guys that the Blazers have trouble defending. So it'll be a nice test in this next road trip. The Blazers have a day off before they play the Rockets, so they won't be tired in that road trip, and it'll be interesting to see if it's the 4-5 matchup, how the Blazers do in Houston against the Rockets in this next road trip, and they'll get some idea of what works and what doesn't work. But that's a tough team for the Blazers to play if it's a 4-5. It would be nice if it was 4-5 and the Blazers were the 4 and the Rockets were the 5 in that first round, because I think, boy, the Moda Center is really going to help the Blazers in the playoffs. And I think they do have a great chance to get to the second round and even win in the second round, because they do so well against OKC, San Antonio, and the Clips.
Yeah, you had it right there. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rice. It's been a blast. I feel like our fans have learned a lot. There's so many questions, and we'll be doing this a lot more from the road when you guys are out on those trips, so stick around. Thank you guys for submitting your questions on Facebook, on Twitter using the hashtag AskRice, and it was definitely a blast getting to use this video phone because we get you right here in studio. So thanks, Rice, and we will see you guys, all you guys and Mike Rice, next time.